We live in a society where a woman's silence is celebrated, but her voice is shamed. We live in a culture where her desires are hidden, her pain is denied, and her body is controlled, yet her body itself speaks louder than the words she is never allowed to say. Today, I am here to talk about that unspoken truth, the truth society finds too uncomfortable, too shameful to confront. Silence has always been the weapon used against women. From birth, a girl is taught to lower her voice, to soften her words, to shrink herself into spaces where she does not disturb the comfort of men. She is told that obedience is virtue, that silence is dignity, that quietness is beauty. She is reminded again and again that her strength lies not in expression, but in suppression. And so, generation after generation, women have been raised to mute their desires, their pain, their rage, their questions, and even their laughter. But while women are trained into silence, patriarchy is deafeningly loud. It screams through laws written by men, religions interpreted by men, cultures created by men, and traditions guarded by men. It drowns out the voices of women by filling every space with its noise, telling us how to live, how to dress, how to love, how to carry our bodies, and even how to breathe. The silence of women is not natural, it is manufactured. The noise of patriarchy is not truth, it is propaganda. Think about how often a woman is told to stay quiet because good women don't argue. She is told to stay quiet about harassment because shame will fall on the family. She is told to stay quiet about abuse because marriage must be saved. She is told to stay quiet about her desires because modesty is her crown. And when she finally tries to speak, her words are questioned, doubted, twisted, or dismissed. Her silence is demanded as if it is a form of respect, but in reality, it is a form of control. Patriarchy thrives not because women are weak, but because women have been silenced. The system needs her silence to survive. Her voice is the one thing it fears. Her silence feeds patriarchy, and patriarchy keeps reminding her that silence is her duty. Now compare that to the noise of patriarchy. It shouts through the television, preaching what a woman's honor should look like. It echoes in parliament halls, where men debate about women's rights without including them in the room. It thunders in drawing rooms, where men laugh loudly at jokes that degrade women. It blasts from pulpits, where men claim that divine approval rests on female obedience. Patriarchy has no hesitation in being loud. It is never ashamed of its vulgarity, its violence, or its hypocrisy. Its noise is designed to silence others. If a woman dares to raise her voice, the noise of patriarchy increases: insults, threats, shame campaigns, character assassination. Her words are drowned not because they are unworthy, but because they are too powerful. What is tragic is that this dynamic has been so normalized that even women themselves sometimes police each other's silence. A daughter grows up watching her mother swallow pain, so she learns to do the same. Sisters silence each other by repeating the words they have internalized: don't speak too much, don't laugh too loudly, don't tell anyone. Patriarchy's noise is so overwhelming that it convinces women their silence is natural, when in fact it is stolen. And in this exchange, women's silence traded for patriarchy's noise, lies the greatest theft of humanity, the theft of female voice. But silence is not empty. Silence holds within it screams that were never heard, truths that were buried, questions that were never answered, and desires that were never acknowledged. Silence becomes a prison where women carry generations of unspoken pain, and yet silence also becomes a form of resistance, because no matter how hard patriarchy tries, silence never kills the voice completely. It only buries it. Buried voices become seeds, and when one woman breaks her silence, she doesn't just speak for herself, she speaks for all the women who came before her and all those who still cannot. That is why every voice matters. That is why every broken silence is an earthquake in the foundation of patriarchy. The noise of patriarchy may sound powerful, but in truth it is fragile. It relies on repetition, on echo chambers, on convincing everyone that its loudness equals truth. But the moment silence is broken, the noise loses its authority, because when a woman speaks, her words cut through the noise like fire through dry grass. Her voice carries authenticity, lived experience, undeniable truth. No amount of patriarchal shouting can erase the reality of her voice once it enters the world. And that is why every system built on patriarchy has always feared women who speak, from poets and singers to journalists and activists. They are feared not because their voices are weak, but because their voices are contagious. One voice inspires another and another, until silence is no longer the norm but the exception. So the battle between women's silence and patriarchy's noise is not just about sound, it is about power. Who gets to define reality? Who gets to narrate history? Who gets to decide morality? Patriarchy insists it has the authority to do all of these loudly and shamelessly. But women are reclaiming that authority by reclaiming their voices. Each time a woman refuses to stay silent about harassment, each time she speaks openly about desire, each time she questions a tradition meant to cage her, she is disrupting the noise. She is proving that silence is not her destiny, it was her conditioning. And conditioning can be unlearned. In the end, the truth is simple. The silence of women was never weakness, it was imposed. The noise of patriarchy was never strength, it was performance. And as more women speak, the balance shifts. The noise starts to sound like what it truly is. insecurity disguised as dominance. The silence begins to transform into collective voices that refuse to be muted again. When that happens, the world will finally hear the one sound patriarchy cannot silence. The unfiltered truth of women's voices rising above the noise, louder than oppression, stronger than fear. From the moment a girl begins to understand her body, she is made to feel that her desires are dangerous. She is taught that wanting is wrong, that longing is sin, that pleasure is shame. Patriarchy has written the rule book where male desire is natural, celebrated, even glorified, while female desire is demonized, feared, and buried under layers of guilt. A boy discovering his body is excused as being curious. A girl discovering hers is scolded, shamed, or punished. A man pursuing pleasure is considered powerful. A woman pursuing the same is considered immoral. This imbalance is not accidental. It is deliberate. It is how patriarchy sustains itself. By normalizing male freedom and female suppression, by turning women against their own bodies and convincing them that their deepest desires are sins they must hide. Think about how normalized male desire is. Movies, songs, advertisements, all shamelessly celebrate it. Boys are told from childhood that they are strong, assertive, conquerors, and it is natural for them to chase what they want. Society forgives them when they stumble, when they indulge, when they experiment. Their pleasure is never questioned, it is expected. And yet the same society tells girls to keep their legs closed, their mouths shut, and their eyes lowered. She is told her worth lies not in what she wants, but in how well she resists wanting. She is made to believe that her purity is her only currency, and if she dares to spend it, she is worthless. Male desire is a right, female desire is a crime. That is how patriarchy survives, by giving men permission and giving women punishment. And yet desire is human. It is not gendered. A woman feels hunger, thirst, anger, love, passion, longing, just as a man does. To deny her desire is to deny her humanity. But instead of acknowledging this, patriarchy has chosen to demonize female desire, because it knows that a desiring woman is a powerful woman. A woman who knows what she wants is dangerous to a system that profits from her silence and obedience. If she owns her pleasure, she can no longer be controlled through shame. If she embraces sexuality, she can no longer be manipulated through fear. That is why her desire must be demonized, because it is the very tool that could free her. Look at how shame is normalized to keep her in line. From childhood, a girl is told not to sit a certain way, not to wear a certain dress, not to laugh too loudly. Her body is policed at every step, and if she slips even once, she is reminded that she carries not just her own shame, but the shame of her entire family. Shame becomes her shadow, following her into every relationship, every choice, every thought. A boy may make mistakes and recover, but a girl is told her one mistake will define her forever. She is conditioned to feel guilty for wanting, guilty for enjoying, guilty for being human. Shame is so deeply woven into her identity that she begins to police herself before anyone else can. That is how patriarchy wins, not by controlling her directly, but by making her control herself. What's worse is that society teaches women to measure each other by the same standards of shame. Women shame other women for being too open, too bold, too free, because they too have been trained to fear desire. A girl who dares to express herself becomes a threat to the system, so the system uses shame as a weapon to isolate her. The word characterless is thrown like a dagger, cutting her down before her voice becomes contagious. Shame is the chain that keeps her tethered to silence, but the chain is disguised as morality, honor, and respectability. That is why it is so difficult to break, because it is normalized, invisible, almost sacred. But when you strip shame of its disguise, you see it for what it truly is, a lie, a fabricated lie meant to protect male dominance. Because while women are being taught to bury their desires, men are being taught to exploit theirs. While women are punished for stepping out of line, men are rewarded for pushing boundaries. The hypocrisy is glaring. A man's infidelity is excused as weakness, while a woman's desire for freedom is condemned as betrayal. A man's appetite is seen as proof of his masculinity, while a woman's appetite is seen as proof of her corruption. Shame is not morality, it is manipulation. And yet, despite centuries of conditioning, women's desires have never disappeared. They resurface in whispers, in secret diaries, in poetry, in music, in forbidden love stories. They rise in protests, in art, in movements where women reclaim their right to feel, to want, to demand. Every time a woman dares to say she deserves pleasure, she is tearing apart the lie that has been used to cage her. Every time she refuses to carry shame for being human, she weakens the chains that generations of women have been bound with. Desire is not the enemy. Shame is. Desire is freedom. Shame is imprisonment. Patriarchy thrives on the myth that women's desires are dangerous, but the truth is women's desires are revolutionary. A woman who desires education becomes a threat to ignorance. A woman who desires equality becomes a threat to oppression. A woman who desires freedom becomes a threat to control. Even a woman who simply desires joy becomes a threat to a culture that profits from her sadness. This is why desire is demonized, because it carries the seeds of liberation. And this is why shame is normalized, because it keeps those seeds buried. But seeds cannot stay buried forever. Once even a single woman decides she will no longer carry shame for being who she is, others begin to follow. Shame loses its power the moment it is rejected. And when women collectively reject it, when they say out loud that their desires are not sins but rights, patriarchy trembles. Because it cannot compete with a force as natural and unstoppable as desire. Shame may have been normalized, but it is not permanent. Desire may have been demonized, but it is not defeated. The time has come to flip the narrative, to stop demonizing desire and start demonizing the system that shames it. A woman's longing is not dangerous. What is dangerous is the culture that tells her she must bury it. What is destructive is not her pleasure, but the prison built around it. When women finally embrace their desires without apology, they will realize what patriarchy has always feared, that shame was never theirs to carry and desire was always theirs to claim. The human body never lies. It carries truths that the mouth is too afraid to utter, truths that society refuses to hear, truths that culture demands must stay hidden. A woman's body is the loudest witness to her existence, yet it is the most censored, the most controlled, the most politicized. Her lips may be silenced by shame, by threats, but her body continues to tell the story. Every scar, every curve, every breath, every tremor, every moan, every withheld scream, all of it is her autobiography written without words. A patriarchy can try to silence her speech, but it cannot erase the language of her body. And that is why the body itself becomes dangerous to the system, because it exposes the hypocrisy of silence. A girl learns very early that her lips cannot say everything she feels. She cannot tell her parents about harassment on the street because she will be blamed. She cannot tell her family about her desires because she will be shamed. She cannot tell her husband about her unhappiness because she will be silenced. Her lips become trained to edit, to filter, to lie. She smiles when she wants to scream. She whispers when she wants to roar. She says, "I'm fine," when she's breaking inside. But her body refuses to keep up with the act. Her body shows the exhaustion in her posture, the sadness in her eyes, the tension in her breath, the heaviness in her steps. Her body reveals what her lips cannot admit, that she is suffocating. Even in pleasure, this truth is undeniable. Women are taught not to speak of desire, not to confess that they long, not to admit that they crave. But the body does not care about cultural instruction. The body responds honestly to touch, to intimacy, to affection, the moans, the goosebumps, the quickened heartbeat. These are the body's rebellion against silence. A woman may never confess what she wants, but her body confesses for her. This is why patriarchy fears female sexuality so much, because even when the lips are locked, the body is loud, and that loudness cannot be censored without violence. So the system resorts to violence, honor killings, restrictions, slut shaming, control of clothes, control of movement, all to erase the language of the body that exposes the lie of female passivity. But the body doesn't just speak of desire, it also speaks of pain. How many women carry in their bodies the weight of trauma that they were never allowed to voice? The body remembers what the lips were forced to forget. Muscles stiffen around old wounds. The back bends under the weight of generations. The womb carries the sorrow of forced motherhood. The skin carries the memory of unwanted touch. The silence of the lips may protect a woman from immediate danger, but the body holds every unspoken truth in its cells. This is why women fall sick with mysterious illnesses, why they carry anxiety and depression like second skins, because the body cannot forget what the lips were made to hide. The body is not weak. It is honest, and honesty in a woman is always punished. There is also resistance in the body. When lips cannot speak, the body protests in other ways. A woman starving herself is not just hungry for food. She is hungry for control over her life. A woman refusing to smile is not just being difficult. She is refusing to perform joy for a system that gives her none. A woman dressing boldly is not just making a fashion statement. She is announcing a truth her lips dare not say, that she owns herself. Every act of the body becomes a sentence in a language society refuses to acknowledge, and yet people understand it, because the body communicates louder than words. That is why even the smallest bodily rebellion by a woman unsettles patriarchy. A woman walking confidently in a public space, a woman breastfeeding openly, a woman dancing freely. These acts shake the system because they are her body speaking truths society cannot tolerate. Patriarchy wants women's bodies to be silent objects, vessels without voices, symbols without agency. It wants the body to be dressed a certain way, moved a certain way, touched only with permission from men, used only for reproduction, never for self-expression. It wants the lips and the body to both be mute. But that dream of silence is impossible because the body cannot be fully controlled. You can cage it, but even inside the cage, the body speaks. It speaks through illness, through resistance, through subtle gestures of defiance. You can cover it, but the body is still present, still undeniable. You can silence the lips, but the body will always find a way to say what needs to be said. The tragedy is that women themselves are taught to mistrust the language of their bodies. They are told their hunger is gluttony. Their desire is sin, their pain is their pleasure is shame. They are taught to disconnect, to listen only to what society tells them instead of what their own bodies are screaming. This is why so many women live as strangers inside their own skin, unable to interpret the truth their body is speaking. But when a woman finally begins to listen, When she finally learns the language of her own body, she becomes unstoppable. Because the lips may be censored, but the body speaks a truth too raw, too real, too undeniable to be erased. The silence of women's lips is not evidence of their consent. It is evidence of their fear, but their bodies tell another story. Their bodies tell us of desires buried but not dead, of pain endured but not forgotten, of rebellions small and large, of truths that refuse to vanish. And when women finally bring their lips and their bodies into alignment, when they speak out loud what their bodies have always been declaring, the world will tremble, because nothing is more powerful than truth spoken in two languages at once. The language of the voice and the language of the body. That is the revolution patriarchy cannot withstand. For centuries, women have been told that their pleasure is sinful, that to want, to feel, to enjoy is a crime against morality, a betrayal of family honor, a rebellion against God. This lie has been repeated so often that many women have internalized it, believing that pleasure is not their right but their curse. And yet, beneath all the layers of shame and fear, one truth remains untouchable: pleasure is power. It is not sin, it is not weakness. It is the most natural expression of freedom. That is why patriarchy hacked so hard to demonize it, because it knows that a woman who embraces her pleasure cannot be controlled. Look at how society treats male pleasure. A man's appetite is considered a sign of his masculinity. His hunger is excused, even celebrated. When he seeks joy, intimacy, or satisfaction, he is called normal, strong, deserving. No one asks him to apologize for his desires. But when a woman seeks the same, she is branded immoral. A woman who takes ownership of her pleasure is not just judged, she is punished. She is called shameless, characterless, dangerous. Why? Because a woman who claims her right to pleasure is claiming ownership of her body, her choices, her destiny. And patriarchy cannot stand a woman who owns herself. Pleasure is not simply about intimacy or desire. It is about wholeness. It is about living in a body without fear. It is about allowing yourself to feel joy without guilt. A woman eating freely, laughing loudly, dancing wildly, loving deeply. These are all acts of pleasure. And each one of them is powerful because it challenges the narrative that her role is to serve others, not herself. Patriarchy tells her that sacrifice is virtue, that suffering is purity, that endurance is strength. But pleasure tells her another story: that she is alive, that her body belongs to her, that joy is not a luxury but a right. And that realization is dangerous to every system built on female obedience. History shows us that pleasure has always been policed when it comes to women. Women were burned as witches because they dared to embrace their sensuality. Women were silenced in literature and art because their voices carried too much honesty about desire. Women were shamed in families for seeking love on their own terms. Even today, a woman who dares to express pleasure is reduced to an object of gossip or violence. The message is clear: pleasure in women must be hidden, punished, or stolen, but never celebrated. And yet, despite centuries of this oppression, pleasure survives. It cannot be erased because it is not foreign to women. It is their birthright. What makes pleasure powerful is that it restores control where it was stolen. When a woman decides that her joy matters, she is rejecting every script written for her by patriarchy. When she says that she deserves not just survival but fulfillment, she is tearing apart the foundation of a culture that thrives on her suppression. A woman who prioritizes her pleasure is a woman who refuses to live only for others. She is a woman who says, I matter, my body matters, my feelings matter, my happiness matters. That declaration may seem small, but it is revolutionary, because every woman who claims it weakens the system that feeds on her silence. Pleasure is also healing. A body that has been shamed, abused, or silenced for too long needs pleasure to remember that it is. Smile. Every dance, every act of intimacy freely chosen is a way of reclaiming territory stolen by oppression. Pleasure repairs what shame tries to break. It tells the body, you are not dirty, you are not cursed, you are not sinful. You are worthy of joy. And in that moment of joy, the chains of patriarchy loosen. That is why the system fears women's pleasure more than it fears women's pain. Pain is easy to control. Pleasure is not. Pain makes women compliant. Pleasure makes them rebellious. The greatest lie women have been told is that their pleasure exists only to serve men, that their body is an object, a tool, a vessel for someone else's satisfaction. But the truth is, women's pleasure has always belonged to them. It is not for anyone else to grant or deny. It is not for anyone else to define. When a woman finally realizes this, she shifts the balance of power. She is no longer a vessel, no longer an object. She is a subject, an author, a creator of her own narrative. And that is the essence of power. Imagine a world where women no longer apologize for pleasure, where their laughter is not silenced, where their desires are not demonized, where their joy is not questioned. That world would be unrecognizable to patriarchy, because it would mean women are no longer controlled by guilt. That is why the fight for pleasure is not trivial. It is central. It is not just about intimacy. It is about dignity. It is not just about bodies. It is about freedom. A woman in possession of her pleasure is a woman who cannot be enslaved. So let the world call it sin. Let the system label it shame. Those labels are nothing but weapons of control. and they have already lost their sharpness. The truth is louder, stronger, undeniable. Pleasure is not sin. Pleasure is power. And the day women embrace it fully, unapologetically, collectively, is the day patriarchy collapses, not with a bang, but with the sound of women's joy echoing louder than oppression ever could.